The following program is suitable for all ages.
Buffone. A certain magic will always linger with the very name. It speaks of courage and fervor in the world's most brutal game. 55, worn by Doug Buffone, a Chicago Bear through and through. He demanded excellence of himself and anyone wearing navy blue.
You tell me what's going on. This is moronic. We're going to get our whipped all the way down the line. I want somebody to get kicked in the and get out there and play. You're getting paid to play this game. I'm playing right. I don't mind you getting beat. I got my whipped many times. But I tell you, I took somebody down with me. You are a professional team. Act like one, for God's sakes.
Football fans, this is Buffone 55. The John Buffone Show.
Hello, Barflies, Bear fans, and draft enthusiasts. It's great to be back with you after about a 3-month hiatus here on Buffone 55, a fast-paced Chicago Bears podcast. A lot has changed since the last time we talked. Obviously, the coronavirus has not only shut down professional sports, but it has shut down a large portion of the country and has forced the majority of us to stay home. I hope all of you are healthy and staying safe. I hope we can provide you a bit of a distraction with this podcast. I also want to say hello to our moderator and producer, Alyssa Barbieri. Alyssa, how are you and your loved ones holding up?
I think we're holding up pretty fine. You know, it's been different. It feels like it's been 5 months, and it's definitely been hard without sports. But you know, there are others that have it far worse than we do. I'm just glad to hop on here and talk some Bears and NFL draft with you, John. I've missed this.
Absolutely, me too. And to be honest, I'm complaining about my gym not being open. I'm complaining about my boxing gym not being open. I'm lifting sandbags in the backyard to try to get a workout in. But there are people that are way worse off than I am right now. I feel very lucky. But I'm also thinking about the people that are, you know, the Medicare, people that are working in Medicare, and obviously people that are having a hard time with losing their jobs or furloughs and things like that. So hopefully we can provide a bit of a distraction.
Absolutely, and that's what we're here for, right? And that's what's kind of great about the NFL draft being this week is, you know, it's a perfect distraction. But they're also raising money too, which is great. But you know, it's nice just to kind of get, you know, distracted for, you know, a few hours from what's actually really happening in the world. So.
Yep, and we'll do our best to distract you at least for an hour here. Let's get to the business of the show. Alyssa, can you tell the people what we're up to?
So we will begin our show with our signature segment, 555. I ask you, John, 5 questions, and you have 55 seconds to respond to each. The 55 seconds is your way of dedicating this and every episode that we do to your uncle, Doug Buffone, who wore number 55 and played 15 seasons for the Chicago Bears. After that, you'll bring in today's guest, Paige Dimakos, for your feature interview. And then we have a special Buffone 55 contest, but more on that later. And then we will conclude the show with Aldo Gandia joining us to talk more Bears in an open discussion between the three of us.
I like it. Let's get going.
Okay, John. So a lot has happened since we last talked Bears. So my first question for you obviously has to do with the Bears quarterback situation. According to Kyle Long, Nick Foles will be the starter and Mitch Trubisky is a goner. So take a listen to what the former Bears offensive lineman told Mark Carman on his Da Windy City podcast.
The writing is on the wall for my friend number 10, and we are going to potentially see him in another jersey in years to come here, sooner rather than later. I think Nick Foles is brought in to be the starting quarterback. There's no real secret there.
So, John, it appears that Kyle Long thinks that the Bears are ready to move on from Mitch. Do you agree with Kyle? The clock starts now.
Well, there's a lot of evidence that points to Kyle Long potentially being right here. Nick Foles is familiar with just about everyone on this coaching staff. He knows the system, and even though he wasn't the most sexy or talented quarterback free agent, look at what Nick Foles does well. It's the things that Mitch Trubisky doesn't do well, decision-making and going through the progressions. Foles reworked his deal, so he's only making about $8 million per year, so it's not like the Bears are paying him top 10 quarterback money, and he has to play. However, I do think the writing is on the wall. When this went down, it was the first time that Pace and Nagy admitted that maybe, just maybe, Mitch Trubisky isn't the future in Chicago by saying this is an open competition. Look, you can defend Trubisky and say that he could turn into something in another year or two, or he can flourish with the right coach or the right personnel, and that might be true. But the personnel isn't going to change too dramatically this year. And the head coach and the GM, they aren't going anywhere this year either, and probably not next year. So it's clear that the Bears are trying to put a contender together for this year. And I think Pace and Nagy see that they don't have the flexibility to tear everything down and build a team around Mitch Trubisky and still make a deep playoff run this year.
Absolutely. It feels like they're more than ready. And like you said, admitting that they have a problem here. Trubisky isn't cutting it. Yes, he wasn't the only issue on the offense last year, but he was drafted to be the guy that can elevate everyone around him in times like this, and he just didn't do it. And like you said, Foles being so familiar with the system and with these coaches on staff, I mean, it does feel like Trubisky is being set up, to not win the job. But hey, we don't know. It's not like he's battling Mahomes or Watson here, if only. It's Foles. He's been a career backup, but it's probably just the Bears fan in me. I don't trust the quarterback position, but even, hey, Foles has made a career of coming off the bench in relief and thriving. So, I mean, honestly, if we have to start with Trubisky and then have Foles come in and lead us to the Super Bowl with this defense, I'm all for that.
It's in Bears fans' DNA to not feel comfortable with the quarterback position. I don't know if that's ever going to change, but I don't know how this whole, the social atmosphere of when our team's going to go into camp, when are they going to be able to do workouts, and I think it does work out to get Nick Foles just because he is so familiar with the system. But bringing in a new guy and, maybe you're going to have an abbreviated offseason, abbreviated workouts, that could throw a wrench into this whole competition thing too. So I'm going to have to let a lot of things play out.
Absolutely. And the one thing I think that we can say is that regardless of who does win the job, that having that competition is going to make both of them better.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope.
I'm trying to be optimistic here, John.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
So, inarguably, Ryan Pace's biggest offseason move for the offense was the acquisition of Nick Foles. Arguably, the second biggest acquisition for the offense was the signing of tight end Jimmy Graham. According to ESPN's Field Yates, Graham $9 million in guaranteed money, all of it in 2020. The issue isn't just the deal, but whether Graham has anything left, as we've seen his productivity decrease. Beginning in 2016, Graham's reception totals went from 65 to 57 to 55, and finally to a paltry 38 last season. Is there any hope Bears fans will see the Jimmy Graham who had 10 touchdown catches 3 seasons ago? Or is your confidence level as low as his more recent touchdown totals? And, by the way, throw in your thoughts on last Friday's release of Trey Burton. The clock is about to tick. Go.
Look, we can discuss the money if you want, but what's done is done. Did they overpay? Yeah. Is it going to bury the franchise? Probably not. So let's not waste our 55 seconds on that alone. But yeah, only 38 catches for 447 yards and 3 touchdowns. But how many balls did the Bears' entire tight end group catch last year? I think 46. Can we agree that this is at the very least, an upgrade? I know the price was high, but even though Graham's skills may be declining, he brings something to the table that's very valuable. Durability. The guy hasn't missed a game in like 5 years. Trey Burton and Adam Shaheen can't stay on the damn field. So at least there should be a consistent presence there. And as for Trey Burton, look, they didn't really gain much by cutting him financially. So this speaks volumes about them just wanting to move on. They still have like 9 tight ends on the roster, so that needs trimmed down a little bit as well. But I think this was the first domino to fall. And this is a huge referendum on what a disappointment Trey Burton was for this franchise, myself included. I predicted that he was going to lead the Bears in receptions in 2018. I was really jazzed about him coming here. Not so jazzed now.
Not at all. My confidence isn't high on Graham just because, the declining numbers over the years and he's getting older. But I do think he's the best tight end that we have now on the roster. And I think that we'll see better numbers from him than obviously what the group tight ends managed last season. But I think that speaks more to the failures of the tight ends last year than Graham. And like you mentioned, like Graham, while he has had some, nagging injuries that he's dealt with, he hasn't missed time, which is important because the problem, like you said, with Burton and Shaheen is they haven't been able to stay on the field. If they were able to stay on the field, who knows what could have happened last year. But, I'm not expecting any gaudy numbers. I mean, until this offense can, prove that it can, function.
Yeah, and nothing against J.P. Holtz or Jesper Horsted, but I don't want to consistently have to dip into the third and fourth tight end every year because your first two can't stay healthy. So if there's a little consistency, I think that'll go a long way. And if you can at least utilize the tight end a little bit this year, knowing that he's actually going to play, then I think that Nagy's offense will run a little more efficiently.
Absolutely, and that's definitely been an area of focus this offseason. You saw it with them bringing in Clancy Barone, a new tight ends coach. So, obviously fixing the tight end position, a position that is supposed to be an anchor of this offense, that's got to happen this season for this offense to thrive. Without
a doubt.
So fans are much more excited about the Ryan Pace signing of Robert Quinn for this defense. So in the 2016 NFL draft, obviously Pace traded the team's number 11 overall pick and a fourth rounder to the Bucs in order to move up to take Leonard Floyd at pick number 9. Obviously, Floyd never lived up to his expectations, and now he's been released and replaced by the soon-to-be 30-year-old 10-year veteran Quinn. Your thoughts on acquiring Quinn and the Floyd failure? The clock starts now.
Look, I'm about to go off the rails here, but I first want to say that I like the Quinn signing. For all the talent on the defense, the pass rush has to be better, and getting to the quarterback will take some pressure off of a secondary, which has some concerns as of this time in late April pre-draft. So for me, this is another case of Ryan Pace trying to put a Band-Aid over a first rounder that doesn't pan out. And I'm not saying that's a terrible thing, but just look at the history. Kevin White doesn't work out. Eventually you have to go out and get Allen Robinson. Now they're much different players, but they still wanted White to be that number one target at some point. Leonard Floyd doesn't work out. You replace him with Robert Quinn. Mitch Trubisky might be on his way out. You got to bring in Nick Foles to cover that up. So far, Roquan Smith looks like he's going to be fine, but we are seeing a pattern. Now, this is the second year in a row that the Bears won't have a first-round pick, so maybe the mindset is you can't pick a bust if you don't have a pick. I don't want this team just to go down that road that we saw years ago, though, of having to throw money to fix messed-up first-round draft picks. I don't want another era of Chris Williams, Gabe Carini, Shea McClellan. I think I just threw up in my mouth a little bit, but I like Robert Quinn. I think he's a very gifted pass rusher, and that's something that Leonard Floyd just couldn't figure out in his tenure with the Bears. I mean, he crafted things out. He was better in coverage, and he was good against the run, but that's not really why they brought him to Chicago. So that's something that they needed to upgrade, and I think they did.
Absolutely, I could not agree more. And I think, there was no way, when you look at it, Pace could not justify paying Floyd $13.2 million for the kind of production that he was giving them, especially because he was expected to take advantage of those one-on-one opportunities lining up opposite Khalil Mack. And I think that's something that we'll see a noticeable difference immediately with Quinn. He's coming off a monster year at the Cowboys, 11.5 sacks on a defense that wasn't exactly the best. Imagine what he can do as part of this front seven and having Mack and getting those opportunities. I'm really hoping football comes back because I really want to see what that duo can do.
Yeah, and we said when Khalil Mack got traded to the Bears that this was just tailor fit for Leonard Floyd to just come into his own, because up until that point, he was supposed to be the guy. Leonard Floyd's like, that's their pass rusher. He's got to be the guy. And then maybe it was going to be Aaron Lynch on the other side, which was crazy to think about. But and then you say, okay, well, now Leonard Floyd's going to be opposite Khalil Mack. He is going to flourish on these one-on-ones, and it just didn't work out. He's a decent player, and Ryan Pace talked about how he got better in against the run and how he dropped into coverage pretty well. But that's not why you drafted the guy. When you moved up to draft the guy, you wanted him to be a guy that could get after the quarterback, and that just did not improve as the years went by. So they go out and they get a guy that can put pressure on the quarterback and maybe take a little pressure off their own secondary, so that they don't have to stay in coverage as long.
And it's definitely a win now move, bringing in Quinn, because this defense, they're, you cannot waste them. And that's another thing, bringing in Foles, obviously, because Pace is recognizing, they cannot waste this defense. His job could be on the line in a couple of years. They have to get it done. And bringing in someone like Quinn that could jumpstart this pass rush alongside Mack is the right move.
Absolutely. I like the move, and they're not paying that much more this year for Quinn than they would for Leonard Floyd.
Exactly. Give me the Quinn signing.
Yeah.
So the rest of Ryan Pace's off-season moves so far have been some new names, including offensive lineman Jermaine Ifedi and Jason Spriggs, as well as defensive backs Jordan Lucas, Artie Burns, linebacker Barkevius Mingo, and a kicker. We're going to have a kicker competition apparently in Ramiz Ahmed. Additionally, He also re-signed 11 Bears who were free agents, including Danny Trevathan, Roy Robertson-Harris, and Deion Bush. So what are your thoughts on Pace's work over the last 5 weeks? You've got 55 seconds.
Well, since Ryan Pace can't pick one of his own first-round busts this year, he decided to bring in everybody else's. I'm kidding, but seriously, 3 former first-round picks on low-end deals. I like the Artie Burns signing. I have a lot of friends in Pittsburgh, and they were excited about this guy coming in. He has a lot of physical skills, showed some flashes early, but ultimately he did not progress as much as the Steelers would have liked, and my friends began calling him Artie Burnt, which I'm hoping we aren't calling him that in Chicago. But I think if Pagano really breaks down his game and finds out what he does well, they might be pleasantly surprised with Artie Burns. And the same goes for Effetti. I think we could see him get moved inside to guard. He played better when he didn't get extended out as much. I think everyone sees Eric Flowers and how he was able to succeed after moving to guard, and think they think the same could happen with Effetti. And Barkevious Mingo, another athletic freak coming out of college. I think he adds interesting depth to the linebacking core. Probably an upgrade over Aaron Lynch at this point, but these are all one-year deals, very low-risk contracts, and maybe they hit on one. And I like the guys they brought back from within as well.
Absolutely. Bringing in some of those low-risk, high-reward contracts, bringing depth at different positions, but also a lot of them had that special team experience, and they lost a lot of special teamers this offseason, so making sure that that's shored up as well. And in my opinion, one of the most important things that Pace has done this offseason is take care of business in-house. You know, he knows the talent on this team, especially on the defense, and the importance of rewarding those that do their job well. We've seen it in the past with some of these massive deals. And keeping that defense as consistent as possible is going to be important in the long run.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about bringing back Roy Robertson-Harris. I think that's a nice piece to bring back, and you don't want your defense, which is the high point of this team. You don't want it to be chipped away too much moving forward.
Absolutely, and we'll see what defensive pieces they decide to bring in the draft. So we're going to segue right into your Bears mock draft, which was released this morning, John. So fans can see the video over at the Bears Barroom YouTube channel. And I can't think of a better question to help segue our guest Paige later than for you to share your thoughts on the players that you mocked to the Bears. So, John, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, I'm going to need a lot more than 55 seconds here, but let's kind of break down where I'm at. I think if the Bears are indeed in win now mode, which I think that's what they think they're in, they should draft like they're in win now mode, and that means plugging some holes as soon as possible. At number 43, I got a guy, Logan Sternberg, a guard out of Kentucky, a 4-year starter, a huge 6'6", 317-pound frame. He's a smart player, but he also has a real mean streak. I think the offensive line needs that bully now that Kyle Long is gone, and that could be Sternberg. I think that could be the guy that kind of sets the mood, sets the attitude, and it kind of puts a big anchor in that line. So let's stay in the second round because the Bears got 2 of them. I think that they find their next strong safety in Jeremy Chinn out of Southern Illinois. Here's what we're working with: a 6'3", 221-pound frame that runs a 4.4 40. Give me some of that. He is raw, but he could be the safety that comes up in the box and allows Eddie Jackson to go back to his ball hawking mentality in center field, which that's what electrified us in 2018. That's how many they got so many turnovers and pick sixes for that matter. Let Jeremy Chinn go up with his big frame and play in the box, and I think you got your safety duo right there. Let's jump to the 5th round because the Bears don't have any picks until then. I think they do address the wide receiver position at that point. I like a guy named Darnell Mooney. He's a wide receiver out of Tulane. No more Taylor Gabriel. But how about a 5'10" blur that runs a 4.3 40 and can turn a quick slant into a track meet? And he can also high point a ball really well. So there's your vertical threat. You look at some of the receiving options they have right now, Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller. They need a guy that can just blow the top off of a defense and, make them stay honest. And whether the deep ball's coming from Foles or Trubisky, you need a guy that can really go down the field. So I like Mooney. He's a little undersized at 5'10", but he's only about a $170. So they need to put a little bit weight on that frame, maybe some durability issues at the next level, but in the 5th round, I think that's a good option. Now we're in the 6th round, pick 196. I see a tight end coming to Chicago, so that'll bring it. That's about 15 tight ends they're going to have in Chicago, but I like the tight end out of Cincinnati, Josiah DeGuara. He can play kind of an H-back, really can block, but he can catch the ball when called upon. He could be an interesting fit in Nagy's offense. And now we're going to stay in the 6th round because I think the Bears are going to flourish in the 6th and 7th round this year. But I think the Bears finally take a developmental quarterback in the 6th round, Cole McDonald out of Hawaii. This is the guy that I talked about a couple weeks or months ago that I really liked. A quarterback with 4.5 speed. He has a little bit of flair. Doesn't try to throw fastballs all the time. Doesn't try to show off how strong he is. He shows us some good touch on his balls and an ability to really go through progressions and see what the defense is giving him. So if you have kind of that cerebral sense about you, you can work on everything else. I think this kid could be something if he sits and learns, and quite frankly, he'll be doing that with the Bears if he's behind Foles and Trubisky. So I think McDonald is an interesting prospect around the 6th round. So now let's go into the 7th round, some of the real diamonds in the rough. Pick 226, a guy named Kelton Moore. He's a running back / fullback out of Nevada. Yeah, I know. The fullback is all but extinct. But I think the Bears need a guy that could potentially bring the hammer once in a while. Like when Jordan Howard was still around. This guy is 5'11", and I think that he's very he's underrated here at 230 pounds. I think he's every bit of 240 pounds. He brings a new element into the offense. He can bring he can be the short yardage guy. He can pick up the goal line carries. So that Kelton Moore out of Nevada would be my 7th round pick. And finally, their last pick in the 7th round, I got a guy named John Reed. He's a cornerback from Penn State. He's small, but he's scrappy. He was kind of hampered by a knee surgery early on in college, but he's a tough kid who is definitely going to put in the work, could potentially fill that starting slot cornerback position at some point, the kind of that Bryce Callahan role. So he's probably a practice squad guy, but he has a shot to maybe make the team, maybe be a good special teamer at some point. I'll give John Reed the nod with the final pick of the 7th round. Did you guys get all that? Do you remember all that? Did you write all that down? Well, just wait for the Bears to trade down twice, and all that's going to go to hell anyway. So it doesn't really matter. So what I just said, write it all down, then toss it away, because things are going to change very dramatically. All right. Do we have our guest on the air?
She is not with us just yet. She needs another 5 minutes. She's on a business call, so she asked me if we can stretch things out a little bit. So I'm going to ask you a question. Logan Sternberg, I like this guy. He's a bulldozer at that right guard position. But I thought you reached a little high for him. I think he's a guy that could be available in the 3rd, 4th round. Were there other offensive linemen like a tackle like Josh Jones available? Was Ezra Cleveland, the guard, available? And I wonder if you are putting a higher priority on guard or tackle, given that Jermaine Ifedi is going to, according to the Bears, although who can believe what they're talking about now? Right. According to the Bears, Ifedi is going to compete for that starting right guard position. Yeah,
and to be honest with you, I get Aldo, and you're one to talk about guards, by the way. But,
that's right.
but I did get enamored. I got a little bit enamored, and it is a little bit of a reach. He is a guy that you might be able to get. But then again, if you get a run on these guys and you like a guy that you're not sure if he's going to go in the 2nd or 3rd round, and you're sitting there in the 2nd, get your guy. And I think, looking at Ryan Pace, he's very much someone that goes up and gets his guy. That's why, honestly, that's why I kind of slotted him in there, thinking perhaps the Bears trade back. And looking over some of the numbers and where they're at, it wouldn't surprise me. And in fact, I would, if I were a betting man, I'd say that the Bears probably do trade back. Do you think that they trade back, given what their current draft capital is?
I got a feeling they might trade both of those 2nd round picks to move back, get a later pick in the 2nd round, and really load up on 3rd and 4th rounders. I think, I think that at that point in a draft, when you're drafting in the middle of the 2nd round, that there really isn't much of a difference between the players you're going to find at 43, 50 and the players you're going to find at 80, 90. So I would not be surprised if Pace actually moves back twice.
Yeah, and I'm not, and I agree with you. And the reason that I have Sternberg so high is because if I'm doing a mock draft, so I'm saying that these are the picks they're going to take. I didn't work in any trades, or I didn't say they're going to get the 83rd pick or anything like that. But seeing that the Bears have a pretty big gap between 2 and 5, if you like a guy and you really want him on your team, but you think, oh, well, maybe he's a 3rd round guy, there's no guarantee that you're going to find a trade partner. So if you like a guy that you kind of have ranked in the third round, but you only have 2 second rounders, you kind of have to take him then, don't you? Because he's not going to last to the 5th.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you always you write out your board. These are the guys you targeted. You've fixed a round where you think, that's a good investment, a good value, and you stick to that board. But I just think that there's just so many players that are in that kind of, that value area of 50 to, maybe over 100. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think one thing is certain is that for the first time in, I don't know how long, but I think in all but one of Ryan Pace's drafts, he's moved up. I don't think that's going to happen this year.
If they move up this year, I don't know what to do, because if they're gonna trade their second rounder next year, and so they can move up, and who are they gonna take? I mean, is there such a pressing need that they got to move up deep into the first round or in the fringe first rounder to find somebody? This just reeks of a draft where the Bears should be trying to move down, because some of the positions of need they have, they're not necessarily top heavy, so they can get value at some of those positions. I'm talking about safety. I'm talking about offensive linemen. They can find some of these guys later on in the third or fourth round. They don't need to. I definitely don't think they need to move up.
Yeah, Alyssa, what do you think? You think there's a chance that the Bears would move up at all, or do you kind of dig in on the scenario that they could possibly move down twice?
No, I think that they'll be moving down. And Brad Biggs even reported that the Bears are expected to try to trade back either one or both of those second rounders, like you were saying, Aldo. So I see them trading back. Like John was saying, there's not really a pressing need that you're going to trade up to get. I don't know. We've seen Pace do weirder things. You really can't anticipate what he's going to do on draft day. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and I guess we have to talk about his draft record to date. This offseason, he's made a lot of corrections to address, guys that he drafted that didn't work out. And so, John, I got to ask you, where's your confidence level that he's going to hit some home runs here?
Well, I guess he does better in the fourth round than he does the first round. So maybe the idea is just to get rid of all these first round picks, takes the pressure off.
There you go.
just keep trading them away. Never have to pick a prospect in your life. You just go after those diamonds in the rough that you're so good at finding. North Carolina A&T. So it's I think as far as first round confidence. I haven't been confident in the Bears' first-round pick since not Pace or Angelo or anybody. I mean, I just read you 3 names that almost made me throw up, and those were I think Jerry Angelo guys. So when have you been super excited about where the Bears are picking? You want to go back to Cade McNown? Do you want to go to Curtis Enos? I mean, what do you want to go to? What first round? I mean, where do we want to start with this? Chris Williams, remember him out of Vanderbilt? How he was going to be a powerhouse blocking for his former quarterback Jay Cutler. Gabe Karimi, who they wanted to trade that pick, then didn't and took him anyway. I mean, where do we want to go with this? The Bears. You could write a book on this thing.
Oh my gosh, Alyssa, you feel the same way about Ryan Pace? Are you on?
I feel the same way. And hey, I'll trade a couple first round picks or Khalil Mack if that's what it takes. I mean, I think it's like a blessing in disguise that they don't have a first round pick that he can blow this year.
Which is not a ringing endorsement of your GM, by the way. Thank God we don't have a first round draft pick, so this guy doesn't have to pick anybody.
Well, he has the 5 picks from rounds 5 through 7. He does much better in the later rounds, so we'll see.
Yeah, put it on auto draft like they do in fantasy. Just like, hey, put it on auto draft. Whoever's the highest ranking player, Pace, you start taking over in the third round.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you can find your guys, because he has done some good work in the second round. They traded back and they ended up getting the Cody Whitehair that year, which was a good pick. And I'm not trying to say every pick the guy makes is bad, because that's not true.
Right.
He was able to find Eddie Jackson. You find somebody like Tariq Cohen in the later rounds, and so but you see some of the bigger names that you take higher, and those are the ones that are going to be in the spotlight, because these are the guys that are supposed to be cornerstones of your team moving forward. And now Floyd's gone, Kevin White's not there, and Mitch Trubisky could be his last stand in Chicago as well. And I don't know how many times a GM can whiff on a first round pick and stick around, but 3 is starting to at least creep into that realm, unless they really start making deep playoff runs.
Let's hope Roquan Smith escapes the curse of first rounders by pace.
Yeah.
I think he has for the most part.
Yeah. And hopefully starts a new positive trend, because we really need these top draft picks to hit, or this team is in big trouble. And I still am holding out a slimmer of hope that Mitch Trubisky can turn around, that he shows up at camp and he's fired up by the competition, and he just really lets Nick Foles and the rest of Chicago and Bears management know that he is the franchise quarterback. I was never excited when they drafted him. I was against the whole thing, but he's a Chicago Bear. Like Draft Dr. Phil likes to say, I root for the jersey, and as long as Mitch Trubisky is wearing number 10 and navy blue, I'm hoping, I'm praying, I'm doing whatever I can possibly do to hopefully see this guy turn his career around and be the quarterback, because we've seen flashes with this guy, In that interview that Kyle Long had with Mark Harmon, he talked about, that he can be Russell Wilson-ish at times, and he can be. And maybe, maybe the marriage with Matt Nagy isn't a good one. Maybe there's something going on there that's retarded his growth as opposed to help them. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, you look at some coaches, and a lot of the times they come in and they kind of get to pick the quarterback in which they want to start their regime with. And Nagy came in a year late because he already had his quarterback, and it's not somebody that he could really get rid of. It was a quarterback that was taken number 2 overall, and he was going to be there at least for the next 3 years. And this is obviously Mitch Trubisky was not a hand-picked quarterback by Matt Nagy, and this was years. This was after 2017. I actually interviewed Matt Nagy whenever he was still with the Chiefs, and he came to an event in Pennsylvania, and all he did was rave about Patrick Mahomes. He loved Patrick Mahomes. He was all in on Patrick Mahomes, and but then again, when he came to Chicago, he was he was all in on Mitch Trubisky. But because what else is he supposed to say? So, but maybe this offense, and we've talked about this ad nauseum throughout last year, that this offense is not really flexible right now. I mean, at least Nagy did not seem to really craft some things around Mitch's strengths, because he likes his system and he wants a guy that can run his system. And that's why I think that you're going to see Nick Foles under center sooner rather than later, because there's already a trust factor there with Nick Foles. There's already a trust factor with the rest of the coaching staff who has worked with Nick Foles. So I think that, we talked about this earlier in the show, all signs would point towards Nick Foles. But if you're a Bears fan, I know that you're excited about another quarterback coming in, albeit not the sexiest free agent, but isn't the best case scenario still your number 2 overall pick? Something clicks and he becomes your franchise quarterback. Isn't that still the best case scenario? It may not be the most logical, it may not be the most likely, but isn't that still the best case scenario?
Yes,
absolutely. I think that's that's all you can hope for now.
Yeah.
Obviously, because we're going to hear forever until the end of time about how they drafted Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, and like you said, bringing in Foles, I think it's a safe move, because at this point, Foles knows how to run this kind of offense. He doesn't have to go out there and, just like be lights out, have a good enough defense where that was allowing like 18.6 points per game last year, that you don't have to do a lot, but you have to do just enough, which this offense wasn't able to do. But I'm like both of you. I'm hoping that, this competition lights a fire under Trubisky, and maybe he, just shows us all how wrong we are. I think that we would all love to admit that we are wrong if that happens. So, we'll see.
Yeah, Aldo, I'm with you. I was never excited about the pick. I tweeted about it the day after, saying I woke up from a nightmare thinking that the Bears' starting quarterback was Mitchell Trubisky, and so I was not thrilled about it. But that doesn't mean that I don't want the guy to succeed, because if he succeeds, the Bears succeed. And all I wanted was for this kid for it to kind of click. And we thought we saw that in 2018. We thought we saw that next step, and 2019 was going to be the next step in that, and that obviously did not happen. So there's a lot of things that have to play out here, and there's a possibility that neither one of these guys are on the team next year, because Foles has an opt-out in his contract. If he plays well, he could opt out of that $8 million contract and go get paid again. And if they drop the option on Trubisky, then he's gone. And all of a sudden, who's playing quarterback for the Bears next year? So both of these guys could, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but there's a possibility that neither one of these guys are on the roster next year. So, okay, do they take a developmental quarterback this year, and maybe he's the guy next year. But so there's a lot of things that have to play out for a team that's trying to win now. Yes. For a team that is built to win right now. They re-signed Danny Trevathan. They go out and get Robert Quinn, and they're making all these moves to win now, and we don't even know who the quarterback's going to be, and neither one of these guys could be there next year.
The curse of being a Bears fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am officially depressed. I mean, the way you pointed out this picture, it is depressing. And I think that anyone that is predicting, a great record, another 11, 12 win season for this team is really, really being hopeful, because there's a lot of facts that are working against this team. And I wanted to ask you, I know this is something that you're going to talk to Paige about, and she just sent me a message saying she's still on her call. She's very apologetic, and she's hoping that she gets off of it in a few minutes. But I want to know from both of you guys, they have to draft a quarterback at some point. And then I saw in your mock, John, you've got that low round day 3 quarterback. Given the scenario that you painted with perhaps neither one of these quarterbacks being on the roster in 2021, shouldn't they maybe think about drafting a round 2 or round 3 if they trade back quarterback?
I mean, if they really feel confident about a guy, then maybe you pull the trigger. I'm not sold on that yet, and mainly because I see a lot of people talking about Jordan Love and how he could be the guy. I think a lot of these quarterbacks are going to go earlier than what people think. I think Jordan Love's going to be either late for someone's going to get jumped back into the first round to get him, or it's going to be an early second rounder. Because look at I see a run on quarterbacks as far as heir apparents being drafted this year. Look, some of the teams that I think could take a quarterback would be Indianapolis for whenever Phillip Rivers leaves. I think that New Orleans could be looking for a quarterback if they're not totally sold on Taysom Hill being their gadget quarterback of the future. You could see Green Bay try to find an heir apparent to Aaron Rodgers at some point. I just think these guys that are worth taking at that point, I think they're going to be gone by the time the Bears get a pick at 43. Now, do you want to go and get a guy like Jake Fromm who could maybe still be there, and he could be your heir apparent? Maybe. So I think that I don't know as much internally as the Bears do. So if they think that, we're going to get Foles and if he plays lights out and he opts out of his contract, we're going to pay him. Or if Mr. Trubisky's playing well, then, we're going to pick up the 5th-year option and he's our guy. So maybe they're committed to either one of these guys moving forward in the near future, whether it is Foles or Trubisky. But I just think a lot of has to play out. And maybe if someone they are really sold on falls to 43, maybe you do, but that wouldn't really fall in line with their win now attitude.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect them to, take a quarterback earlier. I would, like John, you had in your mock draft, draft a developmental prospect, because I think the Bears are banking on either Foles or Trubisky being the guy. That's the hope. So at least, like you said, there's a possibility that both of them couldn't be on the roster at this time next year. So, then at least you would have a developmental prospect. But I don't, it depends if Pace has shown if his guy's there and he wants him, he's going to go up and get him. So ultimately it's going to depend on, how it falls. A lot of those quarterbacks, I agree with John, I think they're going to go a lot sooner, than many expect. That's, kind of the name of the game in the draft, but, we'll see how it all works out.
The other position area of concern for me is the running back position. Not that I don't have confidence in David Montgomery, but, Tariq Cohen is a gadget player, and he can, be useful for a half dozen rushes out of the backfield, but he's much more useful in the slot, catching passes, creating mismatches, and so forth. They need I like Ryan Nall, and I think that he could potentially have an NFL career, but I don't know if it's a starter. So that's it for the running back room. Those 3 guys. There might be a 4th guy who's somebody who I've never heard of, but they need to find either a free agent running back after the draft, or they need to go in and invest on a really good, solid running back. What do you guys think?
Well, yeah, look at the depth chart. I mean, if David Montgomery goes down, Tariq Cohen's not a 20-25 carry guy. Now, obviously, we've seen that Nagy sometimes is not going to give a guy the ball 20-25 times, maybe not even 5 times. But that's neither here nor there. If Montgomery goes down, you can't really have Cohen as your workhorse. And then Is Ryan Nall, are you comfortable with Ryan Nall being the between the tackles guy? Are you comfortable with him being the guy? I know that, a lot of people are excited about him, myself included, just because of how we've seen him perform in preseason games and everything like that. But is that the next step? Because this is a guy that's on and off the practice squad and makes the 53-man roster, brings up and down. But is the next step being thrusted into a starting role? So I agree that I don't know if they're going to address that in the draft. But there's certainly some more work that probably needs to be done at the running back position.
Yeah, there are so many, issues and needs on the offense that, running back and receiver are some needs that kind of go unnoticed because you have, quarterback and offensive line and tight end. But, like you were saying, John, there's no clear-cut number 2 guy behind Montgomery should he go down. And that's a concern. I really think that they need to address running back either in the draft or they need to bring someone in. But, they can't, with the run game, especially last year and just how horrid it was, they need to do something with the run game. I think they need to draft a running back.
You know how this show, Buffone 55, is dedicated to doing a lot of great things, informing people about players. And one of the things we take seriously is the kicking game. And so I know that Alyssa covered.
Whose choice was that?
I know that Alyssa over at BearsWire.com, her other one of many 50,000 jobs she she wrote up about the new kicker. What can you tell us about this guy? Is this, as Heart 4803 says in the chat room, he's just a camp body, Eddie Pinheiro has the job, or based on what you've learned about him, is this guy going to come in and possibly really truly compete against Pinheiro?
I think Pinheiro is going to win the job for next year. I think it's, more just having a body there in camp, because the theme that, just listening to Pace and, Nagy this offseason, the theme this season appears to be competition breeds success. They've been proudly talking about how they're going to have competition at most positions and that they're hoping for the best. So I think, unlike last season where the competition was only really kicker, you have so many different positions and starting jobs up for grabs that, competition, they're really hoping that pushes these guys. They're hoping that, bringing Foles in pushes Trubisky. And I think that they're hoping that, I think they brought Ahmed in, just to make sure that Pinheiro is, he's got his head on a swivel. He wasn't bad last season. Pinheiro connected on, I think it was like 82% of his kicks, but he did have some of those shaky moments, including that Chargers game that cost them a game there. So I think, it's just so Pinheiro doesn't get content. And it just seems to be the message for everyone on this roster. But I just see Pinheiro being the guy next year.
Do you guys remember about a year ago, whenever we were having debates about the biggest issue the Bears have is making sure they have a reliable kicker? Did anybody else yearning for those days where we're just like, oh man, they find a kicker in this Super Bowl bound team? Anybody else miss those days of where your biggest concern was who's going to be kicking for the Bears?
Every day.
I am afraid to say anything about the Bears kicking situation, because when Eddie Pinheiro they acquired him in that trade with the Raiders, I was like, yes, I think this is the guy, and so forth. And then even throughout camp, this is the guy. He's got such a great leg and so forth. And then when he went through that slump that Alyssa just talked about, I was like, let's get rid of this guy. Let's get rid of him. And then all of a sudden he gets out of the slump, and so I'm left thinking, well, maybe he's going to be okay for 2021. I don't want to jinx. I'm just never going to say anything about the kicking game again.
I think that we should just build a statue of Robbie Gould at Soldier Field, just because, we took advantage of just, you never had to worry when Robbie was kicking. And now, every time someone goes up to kick, you're holding your breath.
Yeah, what demons do we need to exercise to get consistent kicking in Chicago? I tried to find some information on Ahmed. Apparently he has, I don't know, I haven't found anything within the last year or so. I saw that he walked on and got a kicking gig in college, and then haven't seen any teams that he's played for since then. So maybe they know something that we don't.
Yeah, he hasn't played since 2018, I believe, at Nevada. And he actually, interestingly enough, he won a kicking competition that year, his senior year. So, he's won a kicking competition. Pinheiro has, but,
Hell, good enough for the Bears. Sign him up. He won a kicking competition. Give that guy a uniform. He can kick for the Bears. He won a kicking competition. Good.
All right, we're shifting gears here because I have not heard back from Paige, so she might not be joining us after all. I'll keep tabs of that, but I do have somebody on the line. So, Alyssa, let's shift gears and take it away with this upcoming segment. Alyssa.
Oh, I was waiting for like the music.
Oh.
Wait.
We shift gears here, so I don't know. Start whenever you want. So the music's in the background.
You haven't missed a beat, Aldo.
So usually there should be music that would signal the transition to our second set of 555 questions. Instead, we're going to play a game.
I have actually been looking forward to this. I'm coming into this pretty cold. So what do you got cooked up for us?
So, John, all you have to do is ask the questions that your producer has prepared for you. That's me, and pretend that you know all of the answers. I will do the rest, including introducing our two contestants.
What are we missing? What did I screw up now?
Oh, you played the music. You're good. Our first contestant is Battleborn from Henderson, Nevada. He studies at Nevada State College, and he is a lifelong Chicago Bears fan. His name is Grant Sims. Welcome, Grant.
Hey.
How you doing?
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. How you doing, Grant? Appreciate you being on, buddy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so listen closely, you two. The rules are simple. We have 10 Bears trivia questions for you, and you have to try to answer as many as you can in 55 seconds. So John will ask the questions, and Grant, you're going to answer, and I will keep count of the amount of correct responses, which I will reveal after the 55 seconds.
Okay.
And from what I understand,
okay, John, so the clock starts.
Clock starts right after I ask my question. Is that how it starts? Is this like a Family Feud thing?
Absolutely.
Am I allowed to say Family Feud or are we going to get sued?
Nope. Don't say it again, though, just to make sure.
All right. Yeah. Just take that out for the podcast version.
You got it.
All right. We're gonna get started. All right, Grant, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. First question. In the 1965 draft, the Chicago Bears selected Dick Butkus with the 3rd overall pick. The Bears had the next pick, the 4th overall pick, as a result of a trade with the Steelers. Who did the Bears select?
Gale Sayers.
Next question. Name the offensive lineman who Phil Emery selected with the 20th overall pick in the 2013 NFL Draft.
Kyle Long.
Question number 3. This year, the Bears have 2 second-round draft picks. One of them their own. The second is a result of a trade with which team?
The Las Vegas Raiders for Khalil Mack.
Question number 4. The last quarterback drafted in round 1 before Mitch Trubisky was in 2003. Who was that quarterback?
Ooh, Rex Grossman.
Question number 5. Name the tight end drafted in round 2 by the Bears who came with the nickname Baby Gronk.
Adam Shaheen.
Question number 6. We're going to get it in. Who was the first player Ryan Pace selected for the Bears in a draft?
Ooh,
I'll let you answer.
That will not count.
Kevin White.
Do we slip it in? Are we going to accept that?
I am the judge, and
Judges,
I say
Aldo?
no.
Oh.
Okay. Let's run down those. Let's run down those 5 questions. Grant, you said in the 1965 draft the Bears selected Gale Sayers with the 4th overall pick. That is correct. The offensive lineman who Phil Emery selected with the 20th overall pick in 2013, Kyle Long, also correct. This year, the Bears have 2 second-round picks. The trade with one of them was with the Raiders. You even said Las Vegas, so good for you. The number 4 question, last quarterback drafted in 2003, you said Rex Grossman. That is correct. And the Baby Gronk nickname was, in fact, put on the head of Adam Shaheen. So 5 for 5, and you know what? That's just on par for this. You got 5 for 5 and 55.
Awesome.
Woo-hoo, Grant, that is smooth.
I feel like you should get number 2 for that.
Was that last one? That was Kevin White, even though it's not going to count, right?
Yes. Kevin
It
White.
was,
okay.
yeah. But Aldo's being a little bit of a, I won't say what he's being, but.
I want this next contestant to win, all right?
Oh,
Oh,
I'm
thanks,
glad
Aldo.
the judge isn't being biased here.
It's not
So with
my
that,
mom.
let me introduce our next contestant, and I must tell you that this person is a surprise even to you, John.
I have no idea who this is.
So this person has worked in the world of sports media since 2007. He currently works for the United States government in a job so vital to America that Vladimir Putin cringes at the very thought that he's protecting our democracy. For the past 4 years, he's hosted this very show.
Oh, come on.
He is John Buffone. Surprise!
So I got to ask myself the questions I just asked Grant.
Oh, I got some questions for you. I'm going to do this. So here's what we're going to do, John.
I'm so bad at trivia. Okay.
As we all know, you've dedicated this show to someone very special in your life, your Uncle Doug. So it was 5 years ago today that we lost Doug Buffone at the young age of 70. So to commemorate the anniversary of his passing, we thought we'd have you answer questions about your uncle and compete against Grant.
Oh,
What do you think?
this is gonna be embarrassing, but I'll go. Yeah.
So I've got 10 questions here, and I'm going to ask them as quickly as possible, and more importantly, you answer them as quickly as possible and hopefully correctly. So
Okay.
Grant had 5 correct, so that is the number to beat.
All right, let's go.
Let me just say that Grant has a voodoo doll that he's putting pins in. That voodoo doll looks a lot like John Buffone.
How did you know?
I'm gonna be pretty embarrassed if I lose on Buffone trivia.
Okay, John, you ready?
Yeah, let's give it a shot.
Okay, the clock is going to start at the end of my first question. So your uncle, Doug, was drafted by the Chicago Bears in 1966 in round 4. He was also drafted in the AFL. In what round was he picked by the San Diego Chargers?
Oh man, I remember he's talking about the Chargers. I want to say it's either 2 or 6. I'll go second round.
Okay, so Doug was a tackling machine at the University of Louisville. What is his current ranking for all-time tackles at Louisville?
It's probably behind. I'll say second.
Which 3-time All-Pro player did Doug replace at outside linebacker?
Oh crap. Oh man. Pass. I'm running out of time.
During his 15-year career with the Bears, how many seasons did Doug have 100 or more tackles?
100 or more. 1.
Doug's
That's
first
probably Rowe with
NFL
way wrong.
interceptions were off of Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Name any of the 2.
Terry Bradshaw.
When he retired, Doug had the team record of most games played. How many games was that?
1 million. I think it was like 100 and 180, 186.
Grant, what size shirt do you want?
I'll take a large.
It's on its way.
Did I get any of those right?
Okay, John, we're going to go through it. You ready? Okay. So he was drafted by the Chargers in round 9.
Holy crap. What the hell are the Chargers thinking?
I think that's an acceptable answer. So his current ranking all-time for tackles at Louisville is 3rd.
Who do we have? Who is in front of him?
No.
Okay, I'll look that up. I'll look it up myself on the interwebs.
Which 3-time All-Pro player did he replace outside linebacker? That was Joe Fortunato. How many games of 100 or more tackles did he have? 7. He had 2 interceptions off Hall of Fame. His first 2 interceptions off Hall of Fame quarterbacks Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas. And you did, and this was really specific too. I was pulling for you here in the end. He had a team record for most games played at 186.
Hey, I got one.
You got one.
I know my family by 20%.
By the way, that one didn't count because it was after the 55 seconds.
Oh my
All right.
You gotta give it to him.
You set me up. I didn't even know I was gonna do this, and then you just start taking pot shots at me.
He's gonna go fresh up tonight.
Well, listen, while we got Grant here, I'd love to know from Grant what he's anticipating in that second round of the Bears draft. Do you think they're going to trade down? You think they're going to trade up? Or have you mocked the draft, and who did you pick for that second round?
I haven't mocked anything, and I've kind of been back and forth. I kind of think that they should trade back and then try to get a corner and also wide receiver, offensive lineman. But I was watching actually your mock draft, John, and I liked yours the most with the offensive lineman. And then
Look at that.
what was your second pick? I forgot. But,
Jeremy Chin, the safety out of Southern Illinois.
Yeah, that made the most sense to me. But when I try to think about what we're gonna do as an organization, I feel like every year we think we know what's gonna happen, and then they pull some wild card thing. I don't know. Pace
you're right.
Pace does some weird picks sometimes.
You're gonna see a kicker taken in like the 5th round.
Didn't we do that with Pat O'Donnell? But that wasn't Pace. But wasn't that like a 6th round pick or something?
It was a 6th or 7th round pick. Yeah, I believe you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Worth
wouldn't
it.
exactly surprise me.
Don't do it, Ryan.
Wow. We went through 55 minutes. Paige is saying, "I'm ready. So sorry for the delay. Should we call her? You guys have time?"
Hell, why not?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Where am I going?
All right.
Jeff.
Grant, you know how to send me your address, and we'll get that T-shirt out to you right away, courtesy of Bears Ballroom Radio Network and Alex Acevedo, the swag man, and we'll have details on how anybody can purchase a Bears Ballroom Radio Network T-shirt coming up on a really cool commercial that we're putting together, and we'll be sharing that on our social media channels. Grant, thanks a lot for being flexible with your schedule.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Grant.
All right, let's call Paige up. And
And
Did we start
thank
with
you
the
for
trivia
humiliating. No, I appreciate you guys humiliating me on my own show, by the way.
I think I had a little bit of an easier trivia than you did. Yours was oddly specific.
yeah.
Obscure Buffone trivia, which now I know, and I'm probably going to get ripped apart by my family for, but
That is hilarious.
Aldo can edit that part out.
Absolutely. It is
can
gone.
you at least make me win?
Voice.
I want the Bears Barroom shirt.
All right. Thanks, Grant.
Thank you. See you.
All right. I believe Paige is with us. Are you there, Paige?
I am here. So sorry for the delay, guys. It's a busy week for me over at the Draft Network, as you can imagine.
Absolutely.
I can imagine this is a pretty uniquely busy week for you guys. So no worries. It just so happens that in the meantime, our producer and our other producer decided to humiliate me during on live air. So that was really awesome. That really filled the time.
I'm glad I was able
you
to help
thank
them
that.
do that. Yeah, I'm glad I was able to help them.
I have
with
you to
that.
thank for that, Paige. Yes. Grace all around. But all right, I'd like to officially welcome Paige back to Buffone 55. She's the chief operating officer at TheDraftNetwork.com and the host of the TDN Fantasy Podcast. Paige, how are you doing? How are things over at TheDraftNetwork.com?
Things are great at TheDraftNetwork.com. As I mentioned and sarcastically said, it's just a little busy, right, for everybody over at the Draft Network, where obviously this is, as we say, our season, right? It's our time to shine. So the guys that work over the Draft Network, guys and girls that work over the Draft Network, are doing an insanely incredible job, putting in a lot of hours, grinding the tape constantly to make sure that they're able to tell you who will best fit the team that you are interested in. And obviously I'm talking to my own people here in the Bears fans. So we will collectively watch Thursday go by and then rally around Friday as we have a couple of picks we can get excited about. And it's a great time for us, and it's been nice that the NFL has still gone on with everything, because, man, I'm sure, and I hope everyone on all of your families are safe and healthy and everything, because that's obviously most important right now. But I know that I speak for myself and for our team. It's been nice to have a mental reprieve from what is going on in the country by just being able to focus on something we all love, right? And that's football. And the people that are listening to this, Bears football. So it's an extra layer of that.
Absolutely. It's giving us a good distraction, and it's providing I think your website providing a lot of good stuff. George Bayless, the host of our Bellissimo on our network, has done over 200 mock drafts at the Draft Network, but besides having a super mock draft generator, your website delivers a lot more. Can you tell us a little bit about the site?
Yeah, we operate like a front office, right, guys? So anything that you are interested in, and I have great discussions with the Bears front office. I'm lucky to have some good connections there, just as to how we can tinker how we operate, right? So we're producing scouting reports. I have multiple guys on the staff that are, putting out 300, 400, 500 scouting reports. They're scouting these guys just like NFL scouts are. I have a former NFL scout on our staff. We operate like a front office. So we're producing content around all the college football players that are going to turn around and go into the NFL. And for all those people, myself included, for a long time, that sat back and went, you know what, Ryan Pace, I could do your job better than you, right? We give you the mock draft machine so that you can sit there and you can mock yourself a perfect version of the Chicago Bears roster to go, you know what, I, in fact, would have taken insert Deshaun Watson back in 2017, right? Because I think everybody collectively, I'm just going to say this off the top because I get tired of seeing it from Bears fans. I was covering football for the Arizona Cardinals at the time, and I was with certain coaches that you may know, Bruce Arians, who's pretty good at evaluating quarterbacks, okay? At the time, he loved Mahomes, but he had the same criticisms that everybody has. So can we please collectively stop being so pissed off at Ryan Pace for Patrick Mahomes? Because the collective draft community did not have Patrick Mahomes turning out to be Patrick Mahomes, right? And there's also variables that go into that, like, i.e. he's with Andy Reid, who's an offensive genius. And, oh, by the way, he sat for an entire year before he had to play. Those are all factors. You can be pissed at Ryan Pace about Deshaun Watson because that was a certified, we watched him beat Alabama in college, I don't know what the hell you're doing, okay? So that one you can be mad at him about, but I just figured I'd start right off the top, just rip the Band-Aid off, right? Because I know Bears fans are always pissed off on social media, and I get it, but the one you can't be pissed off about is the Mahomes stuff, because it collectively as a draft community, he was not rated the number one guy. So we just have to sit back and go, you know what? It sucks that we didn't get him, but you can write all the angry tweets you want about Deshaun Watson. I will accept all of them. You can tweet them to me at @the_sports page, and I will read them, and I will probably like them or retweet them.
Yeah, the coulda have Mahomes crowd is displaying a new age of hindsight, because that was probably never going to happen for all the reasons you just said. I do want to ask you about the quarterback position, though. Do you think Kyle Long is correct in saying that Mitch Trubisky is not long for this team? Can you kind of give us your thoughts on potential quarterbacks if Ryan Pace decides he wants to go that direction this year?
I just don't understand why you would bring in Nick Foles and pay him the amount of money you did if you didn't think that. It doesn't, that's the only logical explanation and landing spot is exactly what Kyle Long said. I mean, if you wanted to create a quarterback competition, you can't bring in a guy like Foles, who has already had arguably one of the more watched crazy fan bases in Philadelphia, create a chaotic quarterback controversy with Carson Wentz and Nick Foles, right? And they're still arguing about it. To this day in Philadelphia, there are fans that still love Nick Foles more than they love Carson Wentz. And I have a bill of goods to sell them, that if they'd like me to sell them to them and trade me Carson Wentz, I'd be happy to do it. But it's one of those things I sit back and I go, I truly believe that if Mitch played to his highest ability, he could beat out Nick Foles in a quarterback competition. but I cannot comprehend how Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace would make this move if they truly were giving Mitch a fair competition. I don't see that. And you can't pay a guy who's going to come in and compete the amount of money that you did to get Nick Foles. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So I think there's no, unless he is just absolutely abysmal, guys, like just comes in as just atrocious, then yeah, sure, Mitch can be the starting guy. I really don't see how this plays out favorably for Mitch. And I'm kind of, to be honest with you guys, I'm disappointed because I really thought a lot of what happened in the first half of the year last year was related to the coaching and the personnel moves in our offensive line. And I really would like to see Mitch used in different ways that I just didn't see. So hopefully Nick Foles is great and hopefully it works out. But I will tell you, as I'm sure if you guys that follow me on social media know, I was not a fan of this move when it happened, and I'm not a fan of it now.
Yeah, they're preaching that this is an open competition and everyone's going to be on even ground. But like you said, the writing could be on the wall that this is Foles' team, and it's just a matter of time before he is under center. Now, some of the weapons that are going to be around whoever is playing quarterback has not really been addressed whatsoever. That's running back and wide receiver. The team currently has 8 receivers on the roster and only 3 running backs, but the team kind of needs that explosive, take the top off a defense kind of receiver, given the release of Taylor Gabriel. And we have already talked about the depth at running back before you came on. But what are your thoughts on these 2 positions? Do you think that there are some potential options in the draft for the Bears to go out and get a running back or a wide receiver at some point?
Yeah, I think the nice thing for them is that this is a deep class, right? And I would say for them, I would focus on a couple of other positions first before I would focus on the wide receiver and running back position, largely because they're crowded rooms to a degree, and there is a lot of depth in both of those categories that I think they can really probably get somebody who's going to be a roster guy later on. And I think it's a good time for them to be able to build that depth. And one of the things to Ryan Pace's credit is he's been really good in those rounds. He's been really great at finding guys in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round that have materialized to be great players for the Chicago Bears. And I think if you're a Bears fan, yes, you can criticize the Trubisky stuff, but really a lot of what Ryan Pace has done specifically in the value selection has been very impressive. So I think that's where I sit back and I go, okay, if the Bears can land a few of these guys that they've hit on in years past, this could be really good. I gotta go back to the quarterback stuff. There's such a big question mark there because I have absolutely no idea what to expect from Nick Foles. And I think if anybody else tells you anything otherwise, they're just lying because you have seen an exceptionally large gap from one direction to the other. The guy who won the Super Bowl to the guy we've watched play in the regular season, even in the regular season in Philadelphia. So I think there's the ceiling and the floor are so far apart on him that I'm so much less focused on this draft for this team specifically because I think the roster, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, is still so damn good that they're like just an 8-8 team walking onto the field because of how good that defense is. And they can be really great, but the if factor is I got to see it first. And I hope that they add some pieces, but I hope that they add some pieces later on because I'd like to see them go in round 2, potentially at an interior offensive line, a cornerback for depth, because I'm not sure that Artie Burns is going to be the answer now that you let Prince Amukamara walk. I think he's a good depth guy, like him as a veteran, but I'm not sure that that's going to be, enough at that position. So we'll see. We'll see what they do. But as I said a little earlier, I do have a lot of faith in what Ryan Pace has done in the middle of these drafts in his tenure. And so I will wait to be critical because I've been very critical of the Nick Foles stuff. So hopefully he wins me back with this latest draft.
Another position that's kind of getting shook up is the tight end position. What are your thoughts on bringing Jimmy Graham in, releasing Trey Burton? And is this, they already have like 25 tight ends on the roster, but is there enough, room to maybe squeeze in a day 3 guy in the draft as well?
Yeah, this isn't a great tight end class, guys. So this isn't one of those, like, definitely a day 3 thing, especially as much money as you just put into Jimmy Graham, which another signing that I just am totally perplexed by. I just don't understand. I've been critical of Jimmy Graham from the second he left New Orleans. And I can't imagine that neither Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers could get the best out of him. So apparently we're relying on Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky to get the best out of him, which I think is just slightly horrifying if you're a Bears fan. But listen, Trey Burton was a big whiff, right? It never, yeah. And listen, you can't bank on health, but as far as a signing, it has been an F. That's it. He got cut from the team. He's never played a significant amount of time. And as a true Bears fan knows, this team needs a tight end, whether Matt Nagy wants to realize it or not, that plays a traditional tight end role. And Trey Burton was not that guy. And they need a guy who can block on the line and can do the things that, I don't know, Bears fans have become accustomed to tight ends doing, literally for the entirety of our Bears fandom. But I think there's going to be some of that cutesy stuff that Matt Nagy got used to playing in his first season that was fun, that he's going to have to adapt, right? And a lot of what we have come and known to love about this Bears team, I will be very critical of whether or not he makes the adjustments I think he needs to make, because this division is still so much of the bad weather, and you're going to win it in the trenches, and you're going to win games by 3 points. I mean, guys, I was at that opening game last year that, what was it, 6-3 final score between Green Bay and Chicago to kick off the year 100 last year. And I'm sitting there going, this has to be the most ridiculous football game I've ever watched in the NFL, because the offenses just couldn't move themselves over the 50-yard line. But that's what this division is and always has been. And if you can't run the ball effectively, if you can't, we had a great defensive line. Our offensive line was not great last year. They got to be better this year, and they got to run the ball more effectively, and got to not go away from it so early, and got to play action and let Mitch do his thing that I didn't see. Let him go on the run, which we finally decided to do, in game 12, right? Those are the things that are frustrating as a Bears fan, as I watch this team. And to get a tight end, there's a guy like, a Steven Sullivan, an LSU tight end that maybe in the last couple of rounds they could go in and try and get some depth. This class is not sexy, and they've already put so much money and emphasis into the tight end, whether you like him or not. Jimmy Graham's here and he's staying. So it's, like I said, I'm not a fan of that. Not a fan of that move. Not a fan of the Trey Burton move. Wasn't a fan when it happened, and it's to be determined on whether Matt Nagy can kind of make the adjustments I think he needs to make on the offense to really have success.
We talked about the defense still very much being the dominant strength of this team, but on the defensive side of the ball, they have some, I don't want to call them holes, but they at least have some areas that they could address in cornerback and safety. Do you see them addressing that early on the draft, or is this a deep enough class that you could maybe see them waiting till day 3 for?
Yeah, I actually have them going round 2, definitely with one of those 2 quick picks in 43 and 50, taking a cornerback. I think it's too important of a position in this defense, and Prince Amukamara's departure is going to be felt. That's a pretty big void, from a vocal person to how much he rallied that locker room. And like I said, I like Artie Burns. It's a good, good opportunities for depth. But I just think when you have, it all depends, right? It depends on who slides there. But a guy like an AJ Terrell from Clemson, potentially being at that spot, I think there's a pretty good chance that you see them at 43 or at 50, going with one of these guys. I really want them to go interior offensive line and cornerback with their 2 picks in the second round, but it will depend upon who's there and who's available. But there should be, because they're not taking a quarterback, because they're not reaching like some of the other teams are going to have to draft out of need. They could be in a pretty prime spot to let the draft fall to them, and you never know. They could package those 2 second round picks and try and mix it up and get back into the end of the first round. Who knows? I would love to see some, aggressiveness from the front office if they really, really like somebody who could make a difference on this team.
Well, we know Ryan Pace isn't opposed to being aggressive in the draft, so we could see some trading up or trading back, I should say. More trading up, who knows? You never know with Ryan Pace. But I want to take a holistic view at the NFL draft. What do you think are some of the biggest storylines that we're going to see develop? I mean, obviously it could be the players falling or, rising, or could it be the fact that this is unlike any draft we've seen in recent history where, coaches and GMs and owners are trying to communicate digitally, and this is going on through Zoom or conference calls? What are some of the storylines you can see maybe developing throughout these 3 days?
Yeah, I think we're already seeing one, right? You've already seen quite a bit on Twitter come out about the technical difficulties of what's going to happen. And I think you should just prepare yourself as a viewer for a very unique viewing experience, right? And they're going to take their time and they're going to make sure they get it right. And you have to imagine I'm sitting there, right? And I'm imagining my dad trying to do this, right? Because that's what this is. It's a lot of these GMs and coaches are dads, grandpas, right? They're old dudes, and they're not necessarily I can guarantee they're not Zooming on the weekends, right? They don't know how to do this.
Right.
This isn't a technology they're used to using. And it's an adjustment, and it's a huge adjustment for the teams, for the front offices, for the league as a whole. This is going to be a year where I think all of us collectively are going to be 5, 10, 15 years down the road and go, you remember that 2020 draft, right? You remember how weird that was? Because it's going to be like that. It is just going to be a unique, different scenario. And I think that will materialize in different ways. I think there's probably going to be some funny moments of players Zooming with family members who maybe say inappropriate things, right? And they don't catch them with the dump button or whatever. I think there's potential for some funny viral moments in that way, which I think everybody should just kind of take for what they are, just lighthearted, funny moments, because I can assure you there will be lots of expletives coming out of my mouth if my brother was getting drafted, right? Or a cousin or a boyfriend or whatever. So I think you should just prepare yourself for a very unique viewing experience. And then as far as the physical draft and whether or not players or certain things, I think there's a really, really good chance that there's two scenarios that I think could play out. One is that a quarterback like a Tua Tagovailoa drops further than we thought. A lot of that having to do with the fact that no NFL team was able to conduct their own medicals. There was no pro day. They weren't able to get in front of him. Obviously, with everything with the coronavirus, he put his own tapes out. We've gotten medicals from his team, but you guys don't. There's, for the average NFL fan who doesn't really know, there is so much that goes into checking the medicals, especially with a guy who's had 2 injuries back-to-back years. So I think there's a significant chance that could play out, and there's also a pretty significant chance that we see more players traded for draft capital than we've seen in a long time. There's just a lot of guys that are still kind of lingering and already coming out about between day 1 and day 2. We could see a significant swap of teams going here and future draft capital and draft capital this year and guys that right? Not average players, really, really good players. And you've already seen it, obviously, with Ngakoue getting into it with Tony Khan today, right, on social media. It's a weird time. So prepare yourself for some strange storylines, because I think this draft could get really, really strange.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about was about a team in the NFC North. That's the Detroit Lions. Some interesting scenarios or hypotheticals and hypotheses being swirled around what the Lions are going to do. Some people say they're going to just trade down. Others saying that this could be the potential time that they go and they get the heir apparent to Matthew Stafford, where it's just you go, if you are in a rebuild, get your new quarterback, and maybe we see Matthew Stafford on the move and they clear up a bunch of cap space. So what do you think are some potential moves for the Lions with that high draft pick?
Listen, the Matthew Stafford stuff, the trades and all that stuff made sense in a hypothetical world. And then you see how his contract is structured, and there's no way they're getting that contract off the books. There's too much dead money this year and next year for them to facilitate getting rid of Stafford. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't go draft a guy like a Tua, right? Especially if they really, really like him, give him the opportunity to sit for a year, maybe a year or two, and then become the guy. I think that, logically, from a Matt Patricia standpoint, maybe that buys him some more time, right, after he's had 2 losing seasons. Still doesn't make any sense to me. They fired, I'm appreciative of it, but they fired Jim Caldwell, who won 9 games back-to-back years, and then they hired a coach who had no head coaching experience, and they still haven't gone over 500. Thank you, Detroit, for that, but still doesn't make any sense. And I think there's a good opportunity that maybe they could do something like that. Get a guy like a Tua if they really, really like him. I think the trading out scenario, everybody wants, all the fan bases, they all want to play out these scenarios where you get to trade back, but you still get the player you want. It's really hard for that to happen, right? And the reality is Jeff Okudah is a surefire cornerback that can play in the NFL. It is really hard to have a prospect be that much of a consensus, like he can be the dude in the NFL. And they just traded away Darius Slay. It is like such a glaringly obvious fit and need that I just cannot imagine. I know it's fun to talk about, but I just cannot imagine them having Okudah there with that glaring need and going, you know what, let's take our chances and move back. Because as we all know, you move back, you might think your guy's going to be there. Every team in the NFL would love a Jeff Okudah. And I just don't think that they have the opportunity to move back and guarantee themselves that they're going to get their guy. Now, there's always a package that could be ridiculous, right? I just don't think those quarterbacks really justify that past Burrow this year. I just don't think there's as much of a, hey, I'm going to give away a crazy amount of picks to move up. I just don't think that's going to happen, especially when you've got a guy like Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton and Cam Newton. These are guys that are available, right? Like it makes this quarterback market in this draft less like, hey, I gotta get myself up there to grab a guy. So I think Detroit's going to end up with Okudah, and if you're a Lions fan, you should be really happy because he's a hell of a player.
One question I got to ask you before we turn it over to the chat room. I know you are a big Bruce Arians supporter. I want to know what your thoughts are on how Tom Brady is going to perform in Tampa Bay in the upcoming season. Do you see this as a big success? How do you see Brady playing out down there?
Yeah, I'm very close to the Arians family, so it's obviously a bias, right? Just like I'm biased for my Bears, but I always say I'm more critical actually than I am of any other team. So usually I'm harder on the teams that I love than I am on anybody else. And it's the same for Bruce and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think for them, if you watch this team play football last year, the second half of the season, their defense was nasty, guys, and we as Bears fans can appreciate that nastiness, right? Because I just love watching that on that side of the ball. And Todd Bowles is just a hell of a defensive coordinator. And he had those dudes just flying around. That line was playing so well. And they really just cemented themselves as such a really, really good football team the second half. The problem is when you have a quarterback that throws 30 interceptions, you ain't winning shit, okay? You just can't. It's not happening, okay? So all of us and the frustrations we've had with Jay Cutler in the past, you can't even imagine what it's like watching Jameis Winston for a whole season, guys. I mean, I was dialed into watching this team and I was going, that is the most mind-numbing pick I have ever seen. And I watched Jay, and I've watched some other horrendous interceptions been thrown and wanted to break everything, right? Watching the team play. So this is a scenario where you bring in the quarterback, right? Who quite literally doesn't turn the ball over, okay? He's so smart, and he makes the right moves. And you put him in arguably the best offense he's ever been in. He's got Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Cameron Braid and O.J. Howard and Ronald Jones. I mean, good night, that offense is ridiculous. And that is with Bruce, who just is such an offensive genius. And because I'm so close to him, I get to see just the person and the genius that he is and how he becomes so close with all of his guys. I think Tom's really, from what I've heard, from what I've spoken to Bruce about, from the insight that I've gotten, it's really reinvigorated Tom, because Bill Belichick is not a player's coach and Bruce Arians is. And I think you're going to see a little FU tour from Tom, because there's a little bit of the reason, as we've all discussed, and I'm sure Bears fans, we know that GOAT mentality if you're a Bulls fan, right, and you watch The Last Dance, that psycho that exists within Michael Jordan, that psycho exists within Tom Brady. You have to be able to replicate a level of competitiveness that there are just not many human beings that can do that. And he's one of those guys where he may not be the most athletic or talented guy out there, but he wants it more than you do. And that matters. And that's not going away. And I think you're going to see a lot of that this year, especially in a division that has a down Carolina team and potentially an Atlanta team that's not very good this year. And I'm still to be determined on what Drew Brees is going to look like this year, because he kind of started to fade as the season went along. So I think it's going to be a really, really good opportunity for the Bucs to show out. So I'm very excited.
It's going to be really exciting to watch, God willing that there is, in fact, football, or at least not a shortened season or anything like that. Alyssa, I know you have some questions for Paige, and I'm sure the chat room does too. So go ahead and fire away.
Hey, Paige, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Alyssa. Thanks for having me.
So I know that you won your bowl. So who did you and your Draft Network team walk away really excited about?
Did you say the Senior Bowl? Is that what you said? You broke up a little bit. Listen, it's not somebody that the Bears are going to draft, but man, Justin Herbert was impressive at the Senior Bowl. It's hard when just to give you a little insight, Mobile is a very interesting place, right? Okay. But the place that we're there for is the football stadium. And that's all you do the whole week, right? You go to Veets, you go to the bar across the street from the hotel, and you go to the football field. Okay. And you're sitting on the field I'm right behind the players and listening to the coaches, and I'm watching Justin Herbert. And he's quite literally, the best way I can describe this is he's flat-footed, okay, 2 feet, not side. He's not sideways with his hips moving or anything. He is flat-footed, facing forward. He takes the ball, and he didn't even really set up to throw the ball. Like, he just went slightly back and threw it, and it went like 80 yards. I'm not exaggerating. It was so stupid that I just sat there and I looked around and I was like, are people watching this? Like, are you watching this dude? Like, his arm is so dumb. And he started just hitting all these windows, and he played really well all week. And one of the criticisms of Justin Herbert has been whether or not he can be a really good leader, because he's gotten this kind of bad rap for being a mama's boy, or a guy who wanted, he went to school in Eugene and that's where he grew up and blah, blah, blah. And I think a lot of that's really unwarranted. I'm actually really excited about Herbert, and the Senior Bowl was kind of the catalyst to, I got to spend time around him, got to hear what the coaches and the GMs were saying, and I think he could potentially be really, really good in the NFL, depending on the system that he ends up on. So that was an easy one for me. It was 150%. I walked away from the Senior Bowl going, holy shit, Justin Herbert's got a cannon.
That's awesome. So obviously the Bears could be in the market for a tight end in the draft. And I saw one of the names that popped up in the chat was Bryson Hopkins. What are your thoughts on him and how he could fit in with this Bears offense?
Yeah, listen, Bryson Hopkins is one of those guys we were higher on coming into the season than we are coming out of the season. That's disappointing for me. Those aren't the type of guys traditionally that I want specifically the Bears to go after, right? Maybe I want the Green Bay Packers to go get those guys, right, to make sure that they continue to maybe deteriorate as a team and an organization. But I don't really like when the tape 2 years ago was better than the tape this year. And that's kind of what we saw from Hopkins. I understand, listen, his dad was a really good football player. There's a lot of excitement about who he is and what he could be. But I think when you talk about the fact that this team doesn't have a first-round pick, and I know we have some good draft capital, I just don't think tight ends where this team wants to go. And I know at least in the early days, and Hopkins is going to be a guy you're going to have to probably get on day 2. I don't think he's going to be available on day 3 because it's just this class really overall is not very deep. So I think he's one of the name value guys that could go a little bit earlier. And I don't really want to see the Bears go in that direction, but maybe if he falls, sure. I just think that this tight end class doesn't do it for me. So there's very few guys that you're going to see me go, I want to stand on the table for that guy. It just doesn't exist, this class.
Which tight ends do you think could fall to the Bears that they could go after?
Oh, man, it's always hard to determine, like, who could fall, because I just don't, and from all the conversations I've had with the Bears, that's not a high position of need for them, right? So they're not, when you talk about who's going to fall, it's very hard to predict who's going to be falling in day 3, which I think is where they're going to be potentially operating and looking at a tight end. The LSU tight end I mentioned earlier, I think that's a really good option for them if he's there later on. I don't know, Bears fans. I guess you guys are seeing something different than I am. I'm just telling you, the conversation I have with the Bears, do not set your hearts on some tight end that they're going to go after. I don't. They got Jimmy Graham. They believe in him. He's going to be the guy. They've got some depth there. They just, there's a lot of other needs that they need to go after, and it could be something they do on day 3. I don't think any of you are going to be all that familiar with the guy they end up getting if it's a day 3 guy.
And we can't let you go without getting your thoughts on the Last Dance documentary last night. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I'm the ultimate MJ homer, truther, whatever you want to call it, right? I'm obnoxious about it, and I own it, because I just don't think that there really is any conversation to be had about LeBron James or Kobe Bryant or anybody else, for all that matter. I just think if you watched Michael, and I was a young kid, my first memories are really those last 2 championships against the Jazz, and that was where I learned if you're a great sports fan, you always got to have great rivals. Man, the Jazz were an awesome rival, and it was so fun to see the city just so enveloped in one team. It was so, to describe what it was like to be in Chicago at that time, and I was 7, 8 years old, but I remember it so vividly, and I remember making signs that said, "The mailman don't deliver on Sunday," right? This is my first talking shit to players, and I'm 7 years old. My dad's like, "I don't know, you were a monster as a kid. Like, I didn't know what to do with you," right? So I think the Last Dance for me has been nostalgic, right? There's a lot of it that I'm sitting there, I'm getting really almost emotional, right? Thinking about my family and being back home in Chicago and what the Bulls used to be. And then there's the other half of it that I was so young that I didn't have a lot of, and now I know a lot of it because I'm in sports and I paid attention to it, but it's completely enveloping me in this just absolute hatred of the front office and the ownership. And that has been there for a long time, right? And I know they just moved away from Garpax, but this has been for me to Reinsdorf hatred from the very beginning. The dude is a cheap dude, okay? I'm a Cubs fan, so I don't give a damn about what he does with the White Sox. If you're a Sox fan, you know that well. He doesn't spend money. He don't care. It's a total disservice to the city of Chicago. Chicago is a basketball city. It is an unbelievable basketball city. Some of the best players in the world come from Chicago. Okay, you go watch any high school in Chicago, you're going to see some of the best damn high school basketball you will see anywhere, period. And it is a total disservice to us that we have gotten stuck with horrible ownership. And that is all the love and all the nostalgia and all the greatness and mostly the pride that I have that Michael Jordan played for the team that I love, right? That is just the equivalent to the reinvigorated hatred that I have for Jerry Krause and Reinsdorf, because I can't imagine that happening in today's society, right? Can you imagine the Bulls winning 5 championships and it's coming out on social media and Michael's making those comments and Jerry Krause is saying, it doesn't matter what happens, this team isn't coming back. I mean, it is absolutely freaking mind-blowing that even was a thing that happened and that they told Phil Jackson they didn't want him back. I mean, I'm getting worked up because it is truly so, if you're a Bulls fan, how can it not piss you off? It's so stupid. It's like, I'm sitting there watching and I'm going, you can't be this dumb. You cannot possibly be this dumb. Yes, they can, right? So as we are well aware of, whether it was the Mr. Wirtz back in the day before Rocky took over, we've had bad ownership at the Blackhawks. You can argue it about the Bears, right? We've loved Virginia McCaskey, but man, we've had some issues there as well. The Cubs' old ownership, right? Terrible for such a long time. And the Bulls, how the greatest sports city in the world gets stuck with a bunch of morons, I have absolutely no idea. So if anybody that's listening to this podcast is a billionaire and is really, really good at, running a business and wants to keep their nose out of personnel, feel free to call me because I will make sure that I facilitate you as the new ownership of any of the teams you want, except the Sox because I want them to suck forever. So any of the other teams, feel free. I will move you in and try and help you out.
Oh man, Paige, it is always so fun to talk to you, and I always learn a lot when I'm talking to you. So I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. Before we let you out of here, can you please tell our listeners where they can find you on social media and tell us what's ahead with the Draft Network?
Yes, you guys can follow me at _sports page with an I on both Twitter and Instagram, and you guys can follow the Draft Network at TheDraftNetwork.com. Obviously, guys, it's a big week for us, so we have some we're going to be just wall-to-wall draft coverage the second it happens. I know it's my team, but they're the best. So they're going to tell you no filter, no BS, what the Bears did, what we should think about it. I rely on these guys so much for their scouting reports and their depth and their knowledge. And it's one of those things that I know Bears fans, we're such a passionate group of people that I know you guys are just going to be so dialed in to this draft. So just check out TheDraftNetwork.com and see what the guys are saying, because I have a feeling there's going to be some potential polarizing picks or maybe some movement from Ryan Pace. And I kind of hope he mixes it up and moves up a little bit. Kind of hope he does something a little spicy. I'm watching it. So let's see what he's got. See what he's got on deck, and I'm definitely excited for the draft.
Can't wait. She's the Chief Operating Officer at TheDraftNetwork.com and the host of the TDN Fantasy Podcast, Paige Dimakos. Thank you so much for being back on Buffone 55. We'll talk to you down the road.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Paige.
All right. This now I think we can go in. We already kind of had our round table earlier on in this, but Aldo, if you can wake up or put down that AARP magazine you've been perusing through. You still there, buddy?
I'm still here. I'm ready to heat up my milk and get ready for bed in a little while.
Oh yeah, you got a pocket full of Werther's Originals ready to
that's right.
Sleep the day away.
What a great interview!
What a great interview with Paige. I love talking to her because she is so passionate about everything she does. She's so passionate about and so knowledgeable about what's going on with the draft. So that was great, and I learned a lot. Hopefully, a lot of people that were listening to this learned a lot as well. Couple things just to kind of, I guess, round all this out. Let's go around the horn real quick. I mean, for Aldo, I mean, we talked about my mock draft. What do you want to see the Bears do with either one of those first two picks?
I've done so much thinking about this, and have been delaying my mock draft, and I'm not even sure I'm going to do one because I just don't know what is going to happen, and I frankly don't know what is the best thing to do. I think that the offensive line is in desperate need of some depth, and I do believe that Juan Castillo is going to get the best that he can possibly get out of the guys that are already there on the roster. But you've got to start bringing in some guys to compete. I believe this team is still in need of a tight end. I am willing to bypass a wide receiver in this draft, at least in the early rounds, and select one late on day 3, just because there are so many other needs. I love your pick of Jeremy Chin at the safety position. I think he would be a great complement for Eddie Jackson, and I think you need a cornerback to compete with Artie Burns and Trey Roberson and Tolliver. And remember, Kyle Fuller, his contract in 2021 is like an exorbitant, like $20 million hit.
It's a big hit.
Yeah.
It's a big hit.
So you need to invest in a cornerback. So I don't know, man. I think you got to trade down. You got to accumulate some picks. And at the same time, you want to win now. So maybe Paige is right. Maybe you trade up and I don't know. This is one of those drafts where I just have no clue. Every year I have like one guy that I really, really want, and then I end up crying because the Bears never get him. Aaron Donald, Quentin Nelson.
Quentin Nelson, yeah.
Oh gosh, that was a tear.
I could go on, and it never happens. This year, I'm just kind of going in with a blank slate and listening to all of our experts and opinion folks here at Bears Ballroom, and just gonna go with it. We'll see.
Alyssa, how about you?
I want to see Pace trade back. I think this might be the year. I mean, all the talk, he's been known to trade up. I definitely want to see him trade back. Definitely address a defensive back with one or both of those first, or if they don't trade back, with one or both of those second-round picks. Or offensive line, or like an explosive receiver. If someone's still there, I don't know, like pick 50, pick 43, pick 50, and your guy's still there, go get him. But I agree that they need to get a tight end, but I don't see them doing that in the second round.
And I guess I wanted to ask both of you as well. We talked about the quarterback situation, whether Foles is the guy or Trubisky is going to be brought back on his 5th-year option, or potentially neither one of them are there. Do you see the Bears going out and getting a developmental quarterback early, late, or not at all?
Go ahead, Alyssa. You go first, and then I will take 20 minutes.
When he first came here, he made the promise, I'm going to draft a quarterback every year, and he never did that, except for with Trubisky. And I think that they will. Something's telling me, you can't predict it, but I think that they would draft a developmental prospect later. I don't see them going up, but then again, I didn't think they were going to go up and draft Trubisky, so I really don't know.
There are 2 quarterbacks that I really, really like in this draft, and you guys know who one of them is. It's Jalen Hurts. I just feel like this guy is capable of being the Mitch Trubisky that we all want to be. Now, having said that, I don't think that Jalen Hurts can come in his rookie year and play to the level that everybody would love to see him play. He's a developmental quarterback. And then the other guy that I really like a lot is Anthony Gordon. Saw him up close at the Senior Bowl. And one of the things that I like about him, besides the fact that he has that Patrick Mahomes factor where he throws all these weird throws. He used to play baseball, so he used to play, I think it was shortstop or second base, and so he used to make all those throws with sidearm, overhand, and so forth. He does the same thing with football, but the other thing that just really super impressed me was just his demeanor. And talking to him, he knows he's got to work on certain things. He knows that he's got to put on some more muscle. He knows that he's not going to come in here and be the number 1 quarterback right away. He was asked, how can you help a team in your first year in the NFL? He says, just by being there and competing and working and trying to get ready and doing whatever is necessary for the team, to win now. And he just really, really stuck out to me as the kind of guy who has all of those intangibles, all of that physical ability and mental correctness, for lack of a better way of putting it, to just come onto a team and develop. And I think the Bears coaching staff with Flip, it would be great to see him here in Chicago. So both of those guys, if you trade down into the 3rd round, I think you pick up Gordon there, or if you're going to stay in the 2nd round, maybe you have to invest one of those 2 picks for Jalen Hurts. That's how I feel.
It's definitely going to be interesting. This is one of the few drafts where I just don't have a beat on anything. I know nothing, and I think the whole aspect of this being a unorthodox draft where everything's happening digitally and online is just going to throw another wrench into this. So it should make for some very interesting theater for us to watch for the next 3 days. And as you know, it's going to probably consume my life for 3 days. So I'm looking forward to it. Before we get out of here, it'd be wrong for me not to mention that this is the 5th anniversary of my Uncle Doug passing away. He passed away 5 years ago to this day. And, this podcast is named after him. It's in honor of him. This is why I started this. It's a real testament to see people still posting stories today about Doug Buffone. The fact that they're still mentioning things on social media 5 years after the fact still reaching out, still sharing stories, still, promoting his career on the field and on radio. And I just have to continue to show my appreciation to what he did for me professionally and personally. I share this story a lot, but when I got into radio 10 years ago, I had a little AM radio show in Western Pennsylvania. Maybe 15 people listened to it every week, and Uncle Doug came on every week to break down the NFL. He'd do a hit for the score in Chicago, and then he'd call into my show. He would call into my show, and it wasn't just because he wanted to break things down and be a good guest, but he wanted to show me how to conduct a show, how to make it interesting, how to do a show with passion. And every time that he came on, I learned something new. And everyone talks about what a great player he was on the field, or what a great host he was, a post-game show host, how they love listening to him after Bears games, which are all true. I love listening to him as well. I never got to watch him play live, but I got to listen to him on the radio a lot. And but the thing that stands out the most for me was his generosity, which is not talked about enough publicly, where he literally would call me weekly, and we would talk about what we were going to talk about on the show, and then we would just BS about the Bears, and then we would talk about the NFL in general, and he would tell me about his ideas for media moving forward. And it was always inspiring to me, because I was working for nothing. I was earning nothing. I was making just enough money to put gas in my car to drive to work. And yet I was always inspired, because he would call me and tell me to stick with it. And I owe a lot to him for, keeping me in the game, keeping me inspired to do that. And without him, this show isn't happening. Without him, I'm not a Bears fan. Without him, I grew up in the Pittsburgh area. Without him, I don't have the Bears, my favorite thing in the entire world. Without him, I don't follow Louisville football or basketball. So I owe a lot to him. And like I said before, it's just a testament to see everyone's still reaching out 5 years after the fact to say what a great guy he was. And I am lucky enough to be able to call him family, and to reflect on family memories, professional memories, and all that other stuff. So I just wanted to say that before we go off the air tonight. And that basically wraps up this episode. Aldo, we're all done here. You can go back reading about how you can invest your Social Security checks if you're still awake. You still there?
I'm still here. I'm almost in tears, because you know how much I love Doug Buffone. I saw him play. I was a kid falling in love with Chicago Bears football. I started watching football, Chicago Bears football, in 1968, and he was on the Bears, and just followed his entire career. So listening to you, John, it really touched my heart. Beautiful tribute.
I appreciate it. And I want to let everyone know that we do plan on being back in a couple of weeks, not only to review the draft, but to go in depth on the undrafted free agents Ryan Pace is signed, or will sign, or hopefully will sign. And you can bet there will be some veterans released after the draft. So we'll get you caught up with that, and we're going to have a special guest to help us evaluate all the transactions. This is a huge week here at the Barroom with tons of draft coverage. At 8:30 Central, we're going to broadcast the second episode of the Fat Mike Chicago Sports Show. He's got a couple of guests, including Carmen Del Falco of ESPN 1000. Alyssa, can you take us through the rest of the week? And don't forget to let people know where they can find your work as well.
Thanks, John. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central, Verlissimo is back to provide another draft-intensive show. Then at 8:30 p.m., Shy Fans in the Stands with Joey Two Scoops and Gregory Sunshine. On Wednesday, it's the Mike North Advantage. Mike is working on a very special guest, and if you remember last week, he had Joe Theismann. Then on Wednesday night, 100 Proof, the guys are going to try their hand at doing their first show ever on YouTube, so you're not going to want to miss that. Make sure you follow Bears Barroom on Facebook or Twitter for full details, because there's a lot more draft coverage later in the week as well. And you can follow me on Twitter at Alyssa Barbieri, and find my work at bearswire.com.
And you can follow me on the Twitter machine as well at JD Buffone. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of Buffone 55. It's always fun, always a pleasure. We'll see you next time.